my children now.
Weirdos, balls of ghouls, how are we all doing? So this is about Freddy's Revenge, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, and why I think this movie is completely underrated, misunderstood, and at times often hated. And I don't feel that. Now, I'm going to be doing some ranking videos of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, and I can tell you now that in with that ranking, this movie features quite highly up on that list. Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, subtitle Freddy's Revenge, was released in 1985. It's a direct sequel to the original. In the Nightmare on Elm Street fanbase, this movie seems to be the unwanted red-headed stepchild. The movie was directed by Jack Shoulder, and it stars Mark Patton as Jesse Walsh, and he moves into the house that Nancy lived in on Elm Street. Also stars Kim Myers, who's a sort of love interest, but not. We'll get to that. And I swore, as a child, that this was Meryl Streep. Genuinely, I thought it was a young Meryl Streep in this movie. I was convinced of it as a kid. And of course, Robert Englund was back as Freddy. So this movie takes place 5 years after the original. This is taking place in the old Nancy Thompson house. Nancy is gone. Jesse's family have moved in. And Jesse starts to have nightmares about Freddy Krueger. But unlike any of the other films in this franchise, Freddy doesn't just attack Jesse in his dreams. He uses the dreams and the nightmares to break down Jesse in order to possess him to come into the living world. And this is something that is like a thorn in the side of Freddy Krueger fans. And to me, it makes sense. So in the original movie, Freddy goes after four kids that whose parents killed Freddy Krueger. But ultimately, he failed because Nancy worked out as long as you didn't show fear over Freddy Krueger and said that he doesn't have no power and turn your back on him, Freddy disappears. So Nancy moves on, Freddy is defeated. Now, to me, it makes perfect sense that Freddy, this dream demon, somebody that was so evil in life that in death he becomes a dream demon to go back after his original victims, failed. And it makes sense for him to come back and try something else. So instead of just attacking through dreams, possession. Why not? And at least it changed it up. Like a lot of the horror franchise movies, they tend to look at what the first one did, ramp up the gore, ramp up the blood, ramp up the titties. But it's the same story pretty much with new kills. But this movie goes a step further because Freddy actually possesses Jesse, brings himself into the real world via Jesse and this possession, and goes on a killing spree in what is essentially our world. So Lisa tries to help Jesse and through love tries to bring Jesse to the forefront to fight off the possession of Freddy Krueger. But there's a time limit because if Freddy stays in control for too long, we lose Jesse altogether. Now, where this movie differs is the fact that this is a possession movie as opposed to just a Freddy nightmare movie. And to me, it makes sense. It's a psychological horror film, yet still maintaining the slasher elements. There's some really cool body horror aspects to this. When Freddy bursts out of Jesse in the pool house, it's brilliant. You know, Jesse opens his mouth, Freddy's eyeball is in there, and then he just sheds his skin. And there's a whole lot of subtext to this movie, and I'm about to discuss that. And this movie is different again because this deals with Freddy more in the real world than in the dream world. And I think that's where the disconnect with fans was. So when the film was released, it kind of had mixed reviews. Some people enjoyed it, nobody loved it. A lot of people didn't like the changes to Freddy. Now, and I like the change. Freddy tried to get his revenge in the dream world in the original movie. He went after the kids of the family that killed him, and he failed. So it makes sense for him to try a different attack. Because Freddy is a smart horror villain. He's not a hulking, masked maniac like Jason or Michael, and he's more cerebral. You know, the original movie was so scary because Freddy came for you in your dreams. That's your safe place. You can have a nightmare, but you can wake up. But in the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, you wake up, but it's like one of those dreams where you wake up, but you're having a dream within a dream. And you're never quite fully aware of what is real and what isn't. And that still happens in this movie. There's a section I remember as a kid where Jesse woke up, and I didn't quite, because I was very young, understand what was going on. And he's dripping in sweat. The scene makes you feel hot. And then his lamp is like melted on the side of his bed. Now, it's clearly part of the dream sequence, but it was a dream within a dream. So it does follow a lot of the lore from the first movie. There's also the pool party scene. Once Freddy comes out of Jesse's body, and once he hits that pool party, he annihilates that thing. He's setting fire to people, he's heating up the fence when people grab it, their hands burn, he's slashing people, he's throwing people into barbecues. It's one of my favourite Freddy scenes. And some people hate that because Freddy's in the real world. But I don't understand the hate for it when it's been... We already know why he's in the real world. It's a possession movie. Now, even though this movie had a mixed reception, it did relatively well in the box office. But that's not what I'm here to discuss. This movie is kind of hated because of the homoerotic subtext, which, if you watch in this day and age, it's not so much subtext, it's at the forefront. But that makes sense to me. You see, the character of Jesse is played by Mark Patton. The actor later came out as gay and said this movie kind of ruined him. But we need to think about back to the 1980s. I was a kid in the 80s, and it was a lot harder for people to come out as gay in the 80s. And this is a teenage boy that looks to be struggling with his sexual identity. It's littered throughout the movie. So not only does Jesse live in the house that Freddy went after Nancy in, but he's trying to push down his homosexual urges and feelings. And in trying to portray himself as this jock when he's clearly not in the movie, and there's clearly something between him and his best friend, and I don't mean Lisa, but he's trying to push all of that down. And in this day and age, it's far easier for us to understand that holding back those types of feelings and denying who you are, it could weaken your mind and weaken your character. And that's why this is great for Freddy. Freddy is going to be weak in this movie. He's been gone for 5 years. He was defeated by Nancy. And yes, I watch A Nightmare on Elm Street probably twice a year, the original. And I always stop it at the knife scene where he just turns into a glitter cloud. That ending of the original Nightmare on Elm Street is a fucking travesty to the movie. Absolute dog shit. They could have made a sequel without having that stupid scene. The car scene didn't really work for me. But then the sex doll through the door. Just awful. And it didn't make any sense. No matter how many times I've watched that movie, and no matter how many times I've tried to work out that ending, it's like, were they dreaming? Are they all back alive? Is Nancy dreaming that? And it was all a trick by Freddy to convince her friends were real? And they're all dead, and now Nancy's dead, but then she can't be because she comes back in the third movie. The third movie completely ignores the existence of the second movie, and I don't understand that. There's the towel whipping scene with the coach. The coach literally gets towel whipped and balled to death. He gets balls thrown at him to kill him. There's a scene where he's like in leather chaps and all this sort of stuff in a nightclub in the 80s, and it's like, subtext. Who's seeing subtext here? Because all I'm seeing is straight homosexual content, and there is nothing wrong with that. And like I said earlier, it explains why Jesse is so easily manipulated by Freddy. And there are lines in this film where people are like, look, he's just looked at his friend and he said, I can feel him inside me, while they both sat in their pants. Well, yeah. I know, and it adds to the story, in my opinion. I know the 80s was a very different time, but I think if this movie had come out in the 2010s, there wouldn't have been an issue with it. There are certain things about this movie that I adore. There are certain things about this movie that I hate. One thing that I hate is the demonic possessed parakeet. It's a little budgie flying around the room, rips the father's cheek open, and explodes in midair in flaming feathers. It's unintentionally hilarious. And even as a kid, I'm like, what? Not very good. That wasn't scary. That was funny. It took me out of the movie a little. But the bus dream sequence at the beginning, I mean, it's depicted in this part here. I love that. The the sort of the tension build of Jesse and these two school friends sat at the back of the bus with Freddy walking up the bus with his knives dragging across the ceiling. The tension in that is unreal. And then it's kind of ruined by the big girly scream that Jesse lets out. Because Jesse in this movie is kind of the final girl, but male. I don't know if this was done on purpose, where they asked him to scream like that, or whether that's just the way he screams. I don't see a problem with it. I don't have to imagine the girly scream that he let out at the thought of Freddy Krueger trying to kill him in his dreams, because as a kid, I had those dreams. I watched the first movie far too young, and it traumatized me. And my mum, bless her, was aware that I'd watched this movie, and it scared me so bad that she decided to put on Freddy's Revenge on video when I was a kid, in order to explain to me, this is a movie, you know, it's not scary. This is Robert Englund. He's a guy in makeup. This is makeup and finger knives, because, you know, I was 4 when this movie came out. So my mum does all of that. I get to the end of the movie, and I was as or more scared than when I watched the first one when I was much younger. Oh, thanks, Mum. And I remember being that young that when I described to my next door neighbour what I had watched at Freddy 2, I described it as a man that looked like he had poo on his face, knives for fingernails, and he was killing people. My next door neighbour was like, what's your mum let you watch there? I was a kid. Freddy kind of looked like a poo when I was a kid because he was so poorly lit. But that's a good thing. Speaking of Freddy, the look of Freddy in this movie is great. Now, I'm not a massive fan of like the hooked witch's nose they gave him in this for some reason, but this is a dark, nasty Freddy. For a portion of the film, he doesn't wear the glove. He had the knives grow out of his fingers directly. It's depicted there. You see it in the transformation scene. But Freddy's sort of features are more pointed. It looks like the Freddy Krueger makeup from the first one with a few little tweaks. His eyes in this movie are scary as shit. Why they didn't keep that aspect, I don't know. But Freddy looked more demonic in this movie than anything up until Freddy vs. Jason, where there's like a demon version of Freddy all lit in red and stuff. I love that look too. The look of this movie, it fits perfectly with the original. But this movie looks great. The effects are great. There are some scenes in this movie that are genuinely scary, genuinely exciting. When you add all of the subtext in, for me, it makes sense. Robert Englund is on form, his voice is on form. I think they modulate his voice a little in this. There seems to be a bit of echo and a bit more bass added to it. And speaking about Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger terrified me that much. When I was a kid, I loved the TV show V. And if you've never seen V, I suggest you... It hasn't aged that well, but it's a great TV show. Robert Englund was in that, and I didn't realise that that was the actor that played Freddy Krueger. Now, bearing in mind how young I was, my mum said, see, that's Freddy Krueger. He's not scary. I could no longer watch V because Freddy Krueger was in it. Even without the makeup, he scared me. There was something else my mum watched called North and South. Jonathan Frakes was in it. My mum was like... My mum used to put it on like a Sunday morning. She'd record it on a VHS off Sky or cable, whatever it was we had back then. And there was a scene with Jonathan Frakes and Robert Englund sat around a campfire. I couldn't watch it. I mean, the programme was shite anyway. I really didn't like it. But, yeah. Robert Englund being sat by that fire. There's like shadow on his face. And as a kid, I'm like, nope. That's Freddy. I'm out. My fear of Freddy Krueger was that bad that... Even when I was a kid, there was a forbidden planet in Cardiff, city centre not far from me. And in the upstairs window, you had Kirk and Spock in one window, and in the next window, there was a cardboard cutout of Freddy Krueger. And as a kid, up until I was about 9 or 10, I couldn't look up at that window. I would go into Forbidden Planet, I wouldn't go upstairs, because even as a kid, I was into all the geeky stuff that I'm into now. And then I spent a great deal of time not being scared of Freddy. Then a new nightmare dropped, and I was like, holy shit. It got under my skin, because now people who were afraid of Freddy Krueger, the movie, or the movie villain, gave power to a sleep demon. And that sleep demon assumed the look of Robert Englund's Freddy Krueger and came into the real world. And as somebody that was still in school at the time, I was like, oh, that's even fucking scarier. Now, the original Nightmare on Elm Street, there are some parts where there's some ropey acting, and to me that adds to the sort of love of the movie, the time that the movie came out in, and I absolutely adore A Nightmare on Elm Street. It's my favourite Elm Street movie is the original. If I was going to rate it out of 10, 10 out of 10 for me as a slasher horror movie. But there's a few little nitpicks here and there. Obviously, the end of the movie is trash, dog shit. Chop that off, 10 out of 10 movie. Leave it in, you got an 8 out of 10 movie. I choose to ignore the ending of that movie to keep A Nightmare on Elm Street 100%. Brilliant. My favourite horror movie. A Nightmare on Elm Street 2. Whilst it has silly moments, they are scripted silly moments. So, you know, when people are kicking off about Jesse with his dancing, it's still well acted. He's done exactly as directed, as scripted. And if he did it on the fly, he did it on the fly. It's still brilliant. The acting from the love interest slash best friend, Lisa, is spot on. I love the look of the film. I love the score of the film. I love everything. I love everything about this movie. Is this a 10 out of 10? Not quite. But when you consider where the franchise of A Nightmare on Elm Street went later on, this movie is gold. You got the original Nightmare on Elm Street. Brilliant. 10 out of 10. You got this one. 9 out of 10. You got the third one. 10 out of 10. You got the fourth one, which dips in quality quite drastically for me. The fifth one, even worse. Freddy's Dead. Possibly the most hated horror film for me because of what they did to Freddy Krueger. They turned him into a fucking Warner Brothers cartoon. Oh, I hate Freddy's Dead. Then obviously they do the new Nightmare, and as much as I love the film and the idea behind it, some of the visuals in that look worse than the stuff they did in the 80s. Why? Really bad CGI. You got a demon dream worms or whatever the fuck they're supposed to be. They look abysmal. And I don't particularly like the look of the demon that assumes the look of Freddy Krueger. It looks more like a rubber mask than any of the other films. I don't like the bone claw glove. I know a lot of people love it, but I don't. And when you compare it to this, you know, this is how big a Freddy fan I am. I have Freddy NECA figures, I have Freddy Funko Pops, I have Freddy Mini Funko Pops. I've got all the movies on DVD and the Blu-ray versions that are out. I'm that sad that I actually own all of the Nightmare films on DVD for different film covers. I know, it's bizarre. Because whatever you want to say about Freddy Krueger, he has the best movie posters and video covers and DVD covers. They're brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I love them all. And yeah, I was that sad that I collected them. I've got them all with like the red and black covers with a photograph image of Robert Englund on them. For a time, I still had the VHS covers. And the pride and joy of my horror collection is this. Let me know in the comment section down below which movie this glove is from. It's specific to one movie. So, A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge. Very, very underrated, in my opinion. In my opinion, the darkest version of Freddy we get. In my opinion, the movie makes sense. You have a teenage boy who is struggling with his sexual identity, and Freddy sees that as a weakness, and it works in Freddy's favour. And then the love of friendship and the love of the character of Lisa brings Jesse back to the forefront. The movie looks fantastic. Freddy looks fantastic. Whilst he is lit a bit more in this than the original, it's nowhere near as egregious as Freddy, you know, doing his Jaws impression with the glove through the water, bursting out wearing a pair of Ray-Bans, arms folded, dropping one-liners, because that was the downfall of Freddy for me. That's where it started to get bad. There are some good kills in that movie, but it's not. It's not as scary. And just before we end, I want to read out this review. This is a critical review, and it says the sequel is clunky, sluggish, poorly cast, not funny, and worst of all, not scary. And it all but dispenses what made the first film scary to begin with. I don't think that's true. I think they looked at the original and said, right, let's do something different. Let's change it up a bit. it makes sense. I don't find the film clunky. I don't find it sluggish. I mean, the opening scene straight into the nightmare, and then you get the school life stuff, and it all tells a good story to me. I don't think it was poorly cast. Now, the original movie starred one Johnny Depp, and his acting in that film is atrocious. It's probably the worst he's ever acted. Even worse than when he played Tonto. Some of the scenes with Nancy in the original are a bit with the acting, whereas later films she's far better. So I don't think it's poorly cast at all. I think the characters, you know, the three main characters of the movie, Lisa, Jessie and Freddy, they act their socks off. I don't see that problem. Not funny. There's a funny element, but I don't think it's supposed to be funny with a budgie. There's not that many laughs in this, but the original Nightmare on Elm Street didn't have any laughs. There was always a comedic element to some things that Freddy did, but they were so sinister. You know, this is the face of God. The cutting off of the fingers and stuff, and the extended arms. The extended arms could look quite cheesy and quite silly. It could be comedic, but it's still scary. I think this movie is the scariest version of Freddy Krueger on film. I absolutely believe that. He is terrifying in this movie. He is so dark in this movie. And it is so rare for a slasher movie to have a male protagonist beginning to end. Most slasher films, the protagonist is the final girl, the Scream Queen. Not in this. The Scream Queen is Jessie. I know early in his life, Patton distanced himself from the movie. He hated the movie. But now he kind of embraces it, and he embraces his homosexuality and the fact that he is an out-and-out proud gay man. You can watch A Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy's Revenge, and Dream Warriors, one after each other, and to me, they fit. There's tonal shifts between all three of them. Dream Warriors is far more neon-lit and more brightly lit, and there are really, really silly elements to Dream Warriors. I mean, the wizard. The wizard element of A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 took me out of the movie. Even as a kid that was terrified of Freddy, I was like, what's this shit? Fucking wizard? Casting spells? What's this stupidity? But then it's also capable of being the most deranged Freddy there is. You know, a recovering drug addict, and he changes his finger blades for syringes. Jesus Christ, Freddy. Leave them kids alone. Now, this cover. I think this is a great promotional material. I like this. I don't know why there's a crow on there. It should have been a budgie. Obviously, we've got Jessie and Lisa, aka Meryl Streep. But look at the glove. Look at the glove on that poster. Who decided to put the bone claw in from New Nightmare? Only it's not from New Nightmare, because in New Nightmare he has a blade on his thumb. It's the only movie where his thumb is a blade as well. Did this image inspire that movie, or was this poster released later for the movie for A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 and they added the bone claw glove in? I don't know. And that's definitely not a exploding parakeet. That is a big black raven or crow, and I don't understand why. But I love this movie cover. Freddy movie covers are the best. So let me know your thoughts on the comment section down below. Tell me where that glove is from, which movie. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing and dropping a like. It'll help this new channel to grow. This was a gaming channel, and I've binned all the gaming off, and this is just going to be a horror movie channel where I discuss horror movies. Maybe I'll get into reviewing at some point, but this is more about my love of certain movies and maybe my distaste for others. And if you did enjoy this video, and if you enjoy this channel, consider checking out my main channel, Beardo Gets Scared, where I do paranormal investigations, debunking, comedy skits, promoting real paranormal investigators and teams, and it's a lot different to what I do over here. Anyway, much love to you all. Beardo out.